Hello, students. Once again, you're welcome to Waidsum University. Today, we're going to be looking at chapter 2 in our network and cybersecurity. Uh, this chapter, the title of our chapter today is securing network devices. Okay, how to secure the network devices in our network, how to secure them. Use Cisco devices in our network, how to secure them. Okay, the first part we'll be looking at is to enforcing perimeter security policies. How do we enforce the perimeter security policies that we ensure that our devices in our networks remain secured? First of all, router is one of the big router switches, the access point. All these are one of the big security devices that we use in the network. So first and foremost, we say routers. They're used to secure the network perimeters. Okay, we use router because it's like the gateway to a given local area network. So a router is a gateway to a given local area network. So we use undoubtedly we use the router to secure the perimeter of a given network. So we're going to look at three scenarios: how router is being used to secure the perimeter of our network. Scenario one is that the router protects the LAN. See, we have the internet where everything is coming from, then it enters the local area network through the router. This is the router 1. Okay, everything from the internet is one, that's the public network. Everything that is coming from this public network enters through this private network, your local area network, through the router. So router is a gateway. So it protects your local area network. The router protects your local area network. So it becomes a fancy perimeter, a perimeter fancy for your local area network. That's for the first scenario. Now, scenario two, the routers screens traffic before a firewall. First of all, we have the internet, the public network, the one wide area network, and then we have a router. So everything coming from here goes to the router. The router screens the data traffic, the data packet, and the traffic before it passes through a firewall. Firewall is to provide protection, okay, protection against hackers before it eventually enters your local area network, okay, with this IP address 192.168.2.0 before it finally enters this your LAN, okay. Then scenario 3 is the zone directly connected to the firewall is called the demilitarized zone. The zone that is directly connected. So this is your public network, the one. So anything coming from this internet goes through your router 1, and then your router 1 sends the data through the firewall, and the firewall access the demilitarized zone, and before it goes, because this firewall trust, or this router, they trust this demilitarized zone, and everything from here goes before it goes into this local area network. So the internet accessible server are located in the demilitarized zone. The internet accessible server, the server that will help to access the internet, they are located in this place. If there's a compromise, then it means that this compromise will help to break through the firewall and send the hacker's message to any computer on this, any workstation on this LAN. So these are three scenarios we have on how we use the router to do perimeter fencing for our network. Now, let's take a look at the three areas of router security. Three areas of router security, how we provide security for the router. Three areas. The first one is the physical security. So how do we provide physical security for the router? Physical security, you can do that by securing your infrastructure all your infrastructure equipment in a locked room. You have a room that is being locked where all your infrastructure equipment are put where everyone don't have access to that particular room. It could be called a control room, a system room, a network room, and so it's up to you. But not everyone will have access to that room. So you have all your your routers, and not only router, the access point, the switch, all your things that you need, your equipment are put in a locked room. That's what providing physical security. Because you've put them in a locked room and you lock the room, then you are able to secure, physically you're able to secure your router, or you're able to secure your network equipment or devices. So you can do this by when you lock them in a locked room, then it's accessible only to the authorized personnel. Only the authorized users or authorized staff or administrator will have access to this equipment. And another benefit is that if you put them in a locked room, it's free from electrostatic and magnetic interference. So when you lock all this, your equipment, your network equipment in a locked room, they will be free from electrostatic and electromagnetic interference. Again, also you protected them and has fire suppression. You've protected them from fire, like fire or gulf. The building may not be able to get to them. Okay. Then you also has control for temperature and humidity, because you know the room temperature of that place that you've kept your equipment. So you have be able to control the temperature and the humidity of that room. So another benefit of having physical security around your network equipment is, or another thing to do, is you install an uninterruptible power supply, UPS, called the UPS. Okay, for all your network equipment, because you cannot have power failure, cannot have electrical power failure. So what you do is to install an uninterruptible power supply, UPS, to keep the spare components available, and also keep the spare component available to reduce the possibility of the denial of service attack from power loss to the building. So when there is power loss in the building, you always make sure that you have enough spare part for each of these components of the devices. Okay, in case there's any issue, you can easily change and without losing your data or losing your network. And although the second area, we said there are 3 areas of network security. The second area is to secure the operating system. After we've done the physical security, the next is to secure our operating system. Okay, to secure the operating system of the router or of the devices that we are using. So to secure the operating system, the first thing to do is to configure the router with the maximum amount of memory possible. Configure the router with the maximum amount of memory, okay, that is available or that the router can take. So you have to do this in order to enhance, so that you don't have a system failure or you have a backup failure or whatever you are doing with the router. So you have to configure with the maximum memory that the router can take. Okay, then in doing this, this will help to protect it from some denial of service attack. So when you increase your memory for router, it helps to reduce the chances of denial of service attack. Then another thing we do in operating system to secure the operating system is to use the latest stable version of the operating system. So you must look for the up-to-date, okay, that meet the feature requirement of the network, the up-to-date version of the operating system. You must constantly update the operating system of the router. That's the point. You must constantly update the operating system of the router, okay, so that if there's a bug, once you update, then the hackers will lose their ability. They will lose the ability to tap into your network. Then another thing to do is to keep a secure copy of the router operating system image and router configuration file as backup. You must back up the operating system and also the configuration file, the file that you use in the carrying out configuration of the router. You must back them up. Okay, now let's move on. So the third area, we said there are 3 areas of router security. We mentioned the first one, physical security, operating system. The third one is the router hardening. Router hardening. Okay, how do you do that? You secure the administrative control to ensure that only authorized persons will have access to your network, or will have privileged accesses to the network, and that their level of access is controlled. You know, you have the ordinary access, you have the privileged access, you have the administrative access. So accesses that are granted to personality should be controlled. That's one way of handling the router. Not like everyone has all the accesses. Okay. Then another thing is to disable any unused port and interfaces that is not being used on the router. You have to disable them. Any unused port or unused interface has to be disabled. Why? If you do this, this will help you to reduce the number of ways a device can be accessed by an outsider. This will reduce the number of ways that the device can be accessed by an outsider or by a hacker or by anyone of whatsoever intention, whether insider or outsider. This will reduce the capability and ability to access your network or break down your network. Another reason for, or another thing to do in order to harden your router, which is the third area of router security, is to disable unnecessary services that can be used by an attacker to gain information or to exploit your system, to exploit your network. So any unnecessary service that will help the attacker gain access to your network, you have to disable those, especially the things you are not using, you disable them mostly in the router. Okay, you disable them. Okay, so that's how to harden your router. Is that okay? Now we move on to secure administrative access, another subheading. We are done with the three areas of router security. The next thing to look at for this chapter is to secure administrative access. Okay, is to look at ways of securing administrative access. Not everyone should have access or have all the access in a network. So we're going to look at the different types of ways of securing the administrative access. Number one is to restrict device accessibility. The device itself, you restrict their accessibility. Okay, another way is to log and account for all the access, and another way is to authenticate the access. Okay, and another way is to authorize action, to carry out an authorized action. Another way is to present legal notification, and another way is to ensure confidentiality of data. Okay, now let's take a look at them one after the other. The first one is restrict device accessibility. The ways of securing administrative access. Restrict device accessibility. Here, you limit the accessible ports and restrict the permitted communicators, number of people, users that will have full access, and restrict the permitted method of access. The method of access that you're granting to people or users has to be restricted, and you also have to restrict the permitted communicators, how many users, who is accessing. You have to restrict, not everyone will have all the privileged accesses. And then you have to limit the accessible ports that people can access. Based on their privileges, then that will determine what they can access on the router or on the network. That's number one. Number two is to log and account for all access. For audit purpose, record everyone who accesses a device, including what occurs and when. So we must be able to record who has logged in, when he logged in, and why he logged in, and what he did when he logged in. So the IT or the administrator, system administrator, must be able to capture who is in, when he went in, how he went in, what he was doing, and so on and so forth. So that for record purpose and for audit purpose, in case anything happened to the network, we'll be able to give account of those that have logged into the system when they logged in and what they did when they logged in. So we'll be able to give account for audit purpose and so on and so forth. Another way to secure administrative access is to authenticate access. Authenticate. So to authenticate means we have to give the user password, right? So we ensure that access is granted only to authorized users or the group of users that have such privileges and services. So if you don't have privileged access, you cannot access. There's a limit to what you can access. If you're an ordinary user in a network, there's a limit to what you can access. If you're from the IT department, you have more privileges. If you are the chief IT officer or chief technology officer, you have all the accesses. So accesses are granted to people in a network or into a router based on the level of privileges that such individual do have. So to authenticate that, we have to give password okay, for users to log in. Then we have to limit the number of failed login attempts and the time between the logs in. So if we have to write, when we are configuring the router, we have to specify that if something has failed like 5 times consecutively, then we block that login. We block that user. We don't let the user log in. We have to code it in that way. We have to configure the router like that to carry out that administrative instruction that if a certain number of attempts has been made with the wrong password, please block the user. So once you write that code during in the command control, the command line interface, during your command line interface of the router, once you make that command and type the command router config, you ask it to block after so number of attempts, then it will also help to authenticate the access. Number 4 ways to secure the administrative access is to authorize actions. Restrict the actions and view permitted by any particular users or group or service. You have to restrict, okay, the actions and view, what they can see, what they can get to, the things they are permitted to use, and so based on their privileges. Number 5, present legal notification. Display any legal notice developed in conjunction with company's legal counsel, and for interactive section. Every website or network, sometimes when you come in, they tell you some legal counsel that if you break this rule, this is there, you'll be liable, and so on and so forth. Those things from your legal department has to be put in the network so that people can see where they are, what they're doing. That if anything goes wrong, they're liable for such a crime. Okay. They ensure the confidentiality of data. Okay, this is very important in securing the administrative access. And how do you do this? You have to protect locally stored sensitive data from viewing and copy. All the locally stored data, you have the IT department or the network administrator. We have to protect the sensitive data from people viewing them and from people copying them. Then also, you have to consider the vulnerability of data in transit. Okay, in transit over a communication channel to sniffing, because people want to sniffing, sexual hijacking, and man-in-the-middle attack from happening. Okay, so these are the 6 ways we can create administrative access. We can secure administrative access. Now let's go to secure administrative access as a subheading properly. Now, what are the things we do in order to actually secure the administrative access? One is to configure the router privileges, to configure the password, to create the Cisco router passwords, okay? Creating the Cisco router password. That's one of the ways during the configuration stage of the router, during the router configuration stage. Now, let's take a look at them. We say all routers need a locally configured password for privileged access and other access. For both the privileged access, ordinary user access, IT user access, chief administrator access, every access we have to configure locally on the router. We have to configure this. What we do is to state which of the router, router are designated with numbers. Could be router 1, depending on how big your network is. Router 1, router 2, router 3, depends how many routers you have. Now let's take a look at, let's say we're using router 1 for instance. We say router 1 config, hash. So first of all, you have to put in the execute mode and then the privilege mode, execute privilege mode, so that you can type in your command line interface. You can type in all this configuration. Now this is what we have. We say router config hash enable secret Cisco. Enable secret, meaning enable password, enable secret Cisco. Okay, because this is a Cisco router. Then we now start. Once you create this first one, then you can now configure this all of this. So we have router 1 config hashtag line. The first line we create, that's the command line. You have to create the command line VTY, which is the virtual teleport. Virtual teleport 0 to 4. Okay, virtual teleport 0 to 4. So you are enabling the command to be typed on the command line interface. So this first line, The second one is a router 1 config line, then hashtag password Cisco, meaning enable Cisco password. Okay, because this is enable mode. Once you put hashtag, is to put in the enable privilege mode. Okay, hashtag password Cisco. Then after that, you say router 1 config line, hashtag login. So enable login. Enable login. So that's what you have done for this router. That's what you have done for this router. So then we continue. We say here for this connection, to access this router, for this connection, this modem from here, to access this router. Remember, this one is from the user PC to access the router. Okay, now from this side, we also configure this accessibility. We say router 1 config hashtag line os o. Router 1 config line hashtag password Cisco. Okay, so that we can access this router 1 from this modem. Router 1 config line hashtag login, enable login. Okay, and then from this user you also configure. This user will be similar to this first user. Okay, will be similar. Okay, for this user, PC with this one is PC with terminal emulation software. Same PC with terminal emulation software. So the same thing you type here. Router 1 config hashtag line console 0. Okay, now you are configuring the console. See this console. Here we are considering this auxiliary, this access to modem. We're configuring the modem for this one. We are configuring the modem, okay, to access the router and the modem. Okay, here is the cursor to access the cursor. Here was the VTY. The first one was the VTY, the virtual teleport. Okay, we are configuring the virtual teleport. Okay. Okay. So for this one, which is the cursor, we are configuring the cursor for this user to access the cursor of the router. We say router 1 config hashtag line cursor 0. Okay, router 1 config line hashtag password secret. Router 1 config line hashtag login. So once from, you see, these are manual integration or configuration of the password for all the interfaces. This interface is for the VTY, the virtual teleport. This interface is for the modem access to the router. This is for the cursor, to access the cursor, okay, and the port. Okay, so this is what we have to do in creating what we call the insecurity administrative access. For every access to this router, we have to create password. And by so doing, we are securing our router. We are securing our device, our hardware device, Cisco router. Now, Cisco router password. Now, let's give a brief look at it. To steal password, what will attackers do? What will the attackers do? First, they will shoulder solve. They will shoulder solve. Two, they will guess password based on the user's personal information. That's why it's not good to put your date of birth as your password. Some people, they use their date of birth as password. They use their children's date of birth as their password. This is not good because the attacker can guess all of this. They will guess anything that feels easy, okay, that's easy for them to use as your password. So then they will sniff. If that doesn't work, they will sniff your trivial file transfer protocol packets. Okay, this is TFTP, means trivial file transfer protocol packet. This is a protocol that helps to transfer your files. They will sniff on this protocol containing the playtest configuration file. We're going to talk more extensively on this, what they do, how they sniff, and the software they use to sniff your protocol, and from there they're able to hack into your password, username and your password. So and what you should do to block that. We're going to talk about that. Then another thing is that they use readily available what we call the brute force attack. Okay, if all of these do not work for them, they use what we call the brute force attack, or they do step by step. Shoulder solve. They guess the password, and then they move to sniff TFTP, that's the trivial file transfer protocol packet. They sniff for that, and then they now use the brute force to access your password or your username. And this brute force attack tool that they use is the North crack, or the Cain and Abel method to crack into your password. Then, so that's what they do, Cisco router password. Apart from they steal the password, there's strong passwords are primary defense against unauthorized access to a network or to a router. So if you want to defend your network or to defend your router from unauthorized individual, you have to create very strong password for the router or for the network gateway. Is that okay? So strong password, in fact, is one of the bane of authentication and authorization, okay, and accounting. We're going to talk about that in chapter 3, authentication, authorization, and accounting. We're going to talk AAA. We're going to talk about AAA, triple A, authentication, authorization, and accounting. So one of the big thing to do for this is to have a very strong password. Okay, we'll move on. Strong password now. How do you create strong password, or what are strong password in network and cyber security? So how do you create strong password, or ordinarily what are strong password? Password, what your password should not look like or should look like. Your password should not use the dictionary words. You should not don't take the dictionary words to make a password. It's very easy to guess, and it's very easy to use brute force attack to break into your password, or the Cain and Abel method to break into your password. So don't use the dictionary words. Dictionary words are vulnerable to dictionary attack. Okay, very easy for hackers to attack. Password may include the following. Now, this is how your password should look like. Should include any of the alphanumeric character. Okay, like 1, 2, 3 and ABCD. 1, 2, 3 and ABCD combined. Alphanumeric character. Okay, with all these dollar signs and every other sign, the currency sign, all the symbols. Okay, so your password should include alphanumeric character, a mix of uppercase and lowercase also. So a strong password should include alphanumeric character, meaning letters, numbers, okay, symbols, okay, and then number 2, your password should include a mix of uppercase and lowercase. Not all lowercase and not all uppercase. You have to mix uppercase and lowercase. Again, your password should include some symbols and spaces. You can actually create space between letters or between numbers, or between letters and numbers, which also makes it a part of the password. So you can put symbols and you can put space between what you're typing, so that the hackers cannot easily second guess your password. Then a strong password should include a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols. We've talked about this. Now, what to note is password leading spaces are ignored, but all spaces after the first characters are not ignored. Okay? Now let's move still on strong password. Apart from you created a strong password, another thing to do that makes your network secure, or your router or network devices to be secured, another thing to always do frequently or constantly is to always change your password. Periodically change your password. Don't make one password for 1 year. You keep using one password for 1 year in your network, or to protect your router, or to protect your network devices, or to protect your access, the privilege that has been created for you. You have to constantly and continuously change the password. The reason is that if the hacker or the intruder detect or break through your system, by the time you change it, he will lose access to your system. Okay, so you should constantly change your password frequently. Implement a policy defining when and how often the password must be changed. So all the staff in your organization, the IT department should come up with the policies, and the administrative department should come up with the policies, and the legal department, they should all come up with the policies to assert when and where should the password be changed. Regularly, maybe often, when, how the password should be changed. They should limit the window of opportunity for hackers to crack the password. And then also, to limit the window of opportunity for hackers is that you should always shut down when you are not using your system. Log out from the network when you are not using. When you are standing up, you log out. When you come back, you log in. All this will reduce the window of opportunity for hackers to crack into the system. Then limit the window of exposure after a password has been cracked. If they've cracked it, even if they've not gotten into it, you have to limit the window of exposure. Always close down, shut down, and when you want to use, then you restart your system again. Always restart your system. Local rules can make password even safer. Okay, now let's move on. enforce minimum password length, okay, as system administrator. The standard minimum for a good password is 10 digits or 10 letter or 10 symbols, whatever it is. The minimum is 10. You know, strong password ranges from 0 to 16 characters. Okay, ranges from 0 to 16 characters. So the standard minimum should be 10 characters. The standard minimum for a strong password should be 10 characters. Make password lengthy. The longer the password, the stronger and the better. The longer and mixed, you know, it has to be mixed with the things we've mentioned. Okay, so then the better. For iOS system, the MacBook and Mac system, then the 12.3 and latest password can be from 0 to 60 characters in length. The best practice to have what? The minimum of 10 characters, right? Now to enforce the minimum length used, then use the global command, right? Security password minimum length, which is around 10 minimum to secure your system or your network devices. Okay, now let's move on. Now, disable unattended connection. We've mentioned this. Disable any, by default, the administrative interface stays active. All the administrative interface, they used to stay active. They logged in for 10 minutes after last session activity. So in the configuration of the router, we should make that anyone that is inactive for like 5 minutes should be disabled, or 10 minutes should be disabled. Okay, should time out as fast as possible. Is that okay? Should time out as fast as possible. Now, still on disable unattended connection, default time is 10 minutes. Okay, you see, default time is 10 minutes. So if you are not using for the past 10 minutes, any interface or any port, any cursor, any VTY that you're not using, should be disabled after 10 minutes. Terminate an unattended connection. The cursor, the VTY, the OS, all of them, terminate them after 10 minutes if they are standing idle, they are not working. So this is to prevent the accessibility by unauthorized user, to prevent accessibility to the network or to the system by unauthorized user. Provide additional level of security if the administrator walks away from the active console section. You have to provide additional security, meaning when you are configuring the router config like hashtag exec timeout. Exec timeout, put minutes and seconds. Meaning this additional security in the router configuration stage should be added. Execute timeout. So it should be added. Okay, when you're configuring, you should add this, the router, you should add this execute timeout. This execute timeout, you should put the time, maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes, 30 seconds, okay, for cursor. All the cursors that are not being used for the next 3 minutes and 30 seconds should log out, should time out, should be disabled quickly. To disable the execute process on the line, for line, you just type router config or should bury the line, particular line, config hashtag line OS 0, execute timeout. To put the execute timeout, okay, you have to type the execute timeout for the cursor, for the aux, for the VTY, all of them you have to put the execute timeout configuration in the command line interface during the configuration of the router. Okay, so disable login for excessive attempt. Now here is when someone has attempted like 5 times, okay, and is putting wrong password, then we should disable. So this command, they all come from what we have looked at before. Like these are all the combination now, all the configuration put together. Router 1 hashtag config terminal, you configure the terminal. Router 1 hashtag config username admin secret Cisco, you put the password. The Cisco 54, this is the password. Okay, the secret tells you that is the password. This secret tells you is the password. The admin is the username. See, username admin, password, secret means password, Cisco 54321. So this is this person's password, Cisco 54321. Okay. Then the next command line, the next on the line is the virtual teleport. You configure the virtual. After you first, you know when we are configuring a router, we must configure the terminal first. Right, router 1 hashtag configure the terminal. Then before you put the admin username and password, and then you configure the line VTY 0 to 4. This is 0 to 4. Okay, because the router has 4 interfaces. It has 4 interfaces, 0 to 4. Okay, then we say the router 1 config line hashtag logi local. So it's from the local. You are logging in from the local network area. Router 1. Okay, you can see router 1 login local. You're logging in to the network from the local area. Router 1 config hashtag exit. Okay, exit when you're not using. So you have to put this command line. Router 1 config hashtag login block for 120 attempts. Doesn't mean after 120 attempts only 5 within 60 seconds. If someone attempt 5 times within 60 seconds, they block. This is what I mean. IP access list. So these are all the commands we are saying. Okay, you can see the attempts and so on and so forth. So these are the commands we type in the configuration command line interface in the router configuration stage, so that when someone is accessing the network, then we can block if the person has exceeded 5 times in the last 60 seconds. Now verify login security. If you want to verify the login security as an administrator, just type router 1 hash show login to display all the login, who has login and when and everything, in what time, when, and so on and so forth. It will run out for you, display all the logins that has taken place to router 1. So just to type this command, router 1 hashtag show login in the command line interface, it will display the login that has taken place. Now verify login security when in quiet mode. So if you want to verify login security when in quiet mode, you say router 1 hashtag show login failures. Okay, login failures. So it will show you who have logged in, the admin, see username admin. This is the source IP address, the different source IP address, the different IP address that we used to log in. The port 1. Okay, you can see the auto entry, which means 1 port. Count, how many they count. The time, this is called the timestamp, to give you the time, the date, and everything. Okay, so it will display all the login security during the quiet time. Now sniffing a telnet port, telnet password. You know, this is what the hackers do. They always sniff the telnet password. They use this software, a particular software, to sniff on your router or your network. And you know, this telnet is like a protocol. So they use this what we call Wireshark. There's a software called the Wireshark. So Wireshark enable the hackers to gain access to your password or to your network and be able to sniff into your system. An attacker is capturing packets using the Wireshark on a local subnet. Now the attacker is interested in TCP telnet stream. So they follow the TCP telnet stream, and then when they keep following it, they like trailing it down, they're tracing it, following it, the TCP telnet, which is a protocol on your network, and then they keep following it, and then they will be able to notice that the administrator's IP address. They will be able to first of all trace your IP address 192.168.2.7. So the moment they're able to get the administrator's IP address, has initiated a telnet section to a device. So once they do this, then they move to the next stage. So first of all, they use the telnet to sniff and to trace, to trace the stream, and in order to get the IP address of the admin. Once they get the IP address, they will now follow the TCP stream. First is the telnet stream, They follow the telnet stream to get the IP address of the administrator. Once they get the IP address, the next thing they do, still on that software, they follow the TCP stream. The hackers will follow the TCP stream. The moment they follow the IP address on TCP stream, then you see what will happen? The name will be displayed, the username Bob. See? This BBOOBB. So this BB meaning you take one word. This double O you take one O, and this B you take one. So the name of the username of this person is Bob, B-O-B. And the password is Cisco 123. So if they follow the TCP stream, they will be able to, first they need to follow the telnet stream to get the IP address of the administrator, the system administrator. And then the next stage is to trace, still on that Wireshark, they will trace the IP address, and they'll be able to hack your username and password. And the moment they get the username and password, they can log into your system. So by following the TCP telnet stream, the attacker or hackers has captured the administrator's username, Bob, B-O-B, and his password, Cisco 123. So we have to be careful. But we're going to talk about what you need to do so that these people cannot have this privilege to trace you through the telnet stream and the TCP stream. So we call it the telnet TCP stream, TCP telnet stream. So they go to follow the telnet stream to get your IP address, and then they follow the TCP stream to get your username and password. So this is what they do. Configure what you should do in order to block them so that the hackers cannot follow up using this Wireshark software to trace your IP address in the first instance, and then break the IP address by following the TCP stream to get your username and password, is for you to administrator to install what we call SSH. SSH. We have to configure the SSH in our Wireshark, okay, in this software, because this SSH is a software or it's a protocol that will help to encrypt your data. We encrypt everything on your network. So once you configure this SSH in your system, and the attackers or the hackers, they cannot break through because everything will be encrypted. Will be like a cryptographic display. Will be meaning you have introduced a cryptography to protect your system, to protect your network device, and so on and so forth. So all the administrator need to do is to configure SSH in the Wireshark system. Is that okay? So when the administrator uses SSH, the hacker no longer sees the telnet packet. It can no longer see the telnet packet. This telnet packet will be encrypted and must instead filtered by the administrator's IP address. So if he does not see the packet, he cannot track the IP address. And if he cannot track the IP address, he cannot get anything. Even if he follows the telnet stream, what he will get will be a encrypted message. Will not be readable, will not be understandable. It will not be any understandable message. Okay? It will not be an understandable message to the hacker. So what they will see, when following the stream of data, the attacker only sees TCP. He will see TCP, fine, and he will see SSH packets, which reveal useless encrypted information. You will see useless encrypted information like this. You will see useless encrypted information like this. You will not see anything meaningful. The attacker will not see your username, will not see your password. So we must configure the SSH in our Wireshark or in our network in order to protect our system. Okay, the hackers from following the telnet stream and the TCP stream in order to break our password. Okay, so router. Now let's take a look at how you configure all the different interfaces where you configure the SSH, router to router. Between two routers, you have to configure SSH. First, there are no current SSH section ongoing with router 1. This is router 1. No any current SSH with router 1. That's the first. So what you see in router 1 is when you say router 1 hashtag show SSH, we see what we see. We didn't see anything. No SSH version 2. When you see V2 means version 2. No SSH version 2 server connection running. and no SSH version 1 server connection running. So what you see in router 1, you can see once you type in the command line interface, you will see that by saying router 1 hashtag show SSH is displaying to you and is telling you there is no SSH running currently running. Both version 1 and version 2 of the SSH is none is currently running with your router. So what it means is that this router is vulnerable. This router is vulnerable, and the attackers will have access to this and be able to hack into the system. Now, with router 2, now let's take a look at router 2. Router 2 establishes SSH connection with router 1. So router 2 now establishes SSH connection with router 1. So provide protection. Okay. So when we type in the command line interface, router 2 hashtag SSH-1, meaning it's telling us, oh, Bob. It gives you the IP address, the password is not displayed. Okay. So it's telling you router 1 is in the enable mode. It's in the enable mode. So that's in the third case, we said there is an incoming and outgoing SSH version 2 session with the user Bob. In the third case, router 1 hashtag show SSH connection version mode encryption. So it's displaying that there's SSH with Bob. So this is what it is. You have to configure SSH to create protection for the system or for the network device. Okay. Now here is the host to router SSH. This is the interface, the terminal. Okay, the TCP IP terminal. You put the IP address of the host. Okay, TCP IP address. This new connection, Terra term. In the Terra term or Terra portal, you put your new in your new connection. You put the host that you want to create that will have a SSH with a specific router. You put the IP address, and then you see you have Telnet. We are configuring what? SSH. So you click on SSH. That's the service that you want. That's the service that you want. The port, you see port 22. TCP port is 22. Okay, then you click OK. Then log in as what? Bob. This is the username. And then you key in your password, the Bob's password. Okay. So it's now in the enable mode. So this third figure is now showing this is the first stage. It will take you to second stage. You put your username and password. It will take you to the enable mode. Okay. So once you do that, you write here. You type your configuration of the SSH with the router. So host to router SSH. You type it here. Router 1 config blah 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 SSH. Okay. So this is the interface. This is what we do, and this is how we do what we do. Now, here's the big question. Should everyone in the IT department have the same level of access to the network infrastructure, like the router, the switch, the access point? Should everyone in the IT department have the same access to all the network infrastructure? No. Hell no. The answer is no. Everyone cannot have the same access, or else you compromise the entire network. Okay? So in a network, what we should do, we should configure either the privilege levels, or we configure either the privilege levels, you create different levels for the people, or you use what we call the role-based command line interface. Role-based. Based on their role, you give them privileges based on their role. So either we follow the role-based command line, or we use the privilege level, or both of them. Okay? Now, for example, look at the privilege levels. This is security operator privileges. A security operator privileges is allowed to configure AA, that's authentication, authorization, and accounting. So it's allowed to have access configuration of this one. Issue show command. You're able to put show command to see what is running, what is not running. Configure firewalls for the IP, for the IT staff and all this one. So they should be able to have access to configure the firewalls, and then configure the intrusion detection service and intrusion prevention services. So both they should have access to configure, or they should be configured with intrusion detection services and intrusion prevention services. They also be enabled or configured with NetFlow. Now for one engineer privileges, If you're an engineer that is running the wide area network for the company, for the network, what we configure for you is that configure the routing, the whole routing, the routing protocol and everything. Configure the interfaces. Engineer has to be able to configure or enable all the interfaces and issue show command. So you can see the engineer's level of this thing is a bit higher. But the IT does most of the work within the system, but the engineer is with the rest of the world. Okay, so these are the privileges that are given to the people in the system administrative department or the IT department, information technology department, is different. You don't give everyone same access, or else you jeopardize the entire network. Now let's take a look at their level. We have level 0, privilege levels. Level 0, predefined for user level access privileges. All the small users in the office, they are in the level 0. The accesses are the basic things. Okay, seldom used, but include 5 commands like disable, enable, exit, help, and logout. This is what they have. Okay, then level 1, the level 1 is the user execute mode. Level 1 is the user execute mode. Okay, this one are like the basic IT people. The default level for login with the router prompt, router enable. Okay, so a user cannot make any changes or view the running configuration file. Cannot make any changes like the basic user. Level 1 is for basic user. They cannot make any change. They cannot configure anything by themselves. Theirs is just to use the system only. Level 2 to 14 may be customized for user level privileges. They have all the user level privileges they also have, and then the command from the lower levels may be moved up to a higher level, or the command from higher levels may be moved down to a lower level. So they have some a little bit privileges. Apart from the user level privileges, they have some command line privileges. Then the level 50 is the privileged execute mode. Okay, these are the big IT people. So here, reserved for the enable mode privileges, enable command, those who can configure. Also, users can view and change all the aspects of the configuration. So you can see this is the highest level that you're going to have. Now let's take a look still on the privilege level limitation. What are the limitations? No access control to specific interfaces, port, logical interfaces, and slot on a router. So if you limit privileges for people, then there will be no access control to specific interfaces. Okay, you don't have to worry. Command available at lower privilege levels are always executable at higher levels. Those with higher privileges will also have all the command at lower levels. Command specifically set on higher level, they are not available for those who have lower privileges. All the commands at higher levels are not available for those who are in lower level, but those who are in higher level, they have all the privileges both for themselves, which is for higher level, and for the lower level, they both have. Now, assigning a command with a multiple keywords to a specific privilege level also assigns all commands associated with the first key to the same privilege level. Okay, like an example is the show IP route command. Now let's look at another subhead, which is password recovery. How do you recover password in case anything happens to the system? In the event that the router is compromised or needs to be recovered from the misconfigured password, maybe we configured a wrong password or it has been attacked, we need to recover it. An administrator must understand password recovery procedure. Now, what are the procedure for recovery our password if the router has been compromised? For security reasons, password recovery requires the administrator to have physical access to the router through a cursor cable. So you're going to bring your computer to the router physically, okay, through a cursor cable. So you connect your laptop, your system administrative laptop, to the router directly through a cursor connection. Okay, so you're going to do this physically. If anything has happened to the router, okay, if it has been compromised, you have to come physically and bring your system like this. So these are the 50 things or 60 things you're going to do. Administrator, you set up the cursor connection parameters. Then you record the configuration register value, the value you have, power the router off, and then you power it on again. You switch it off and you switch it on. Then you press the brake on terminal within the 60 seconds of power up to the router in the MUMO. Okay, we're going to talk about this MUMO. The MUMO is to help you to prepare the router for password recovery by booting it up to in the MUMO mode. MUMO mode helps to recover this password. Now, the next thing is to change the configuration register setting, and then we reboot. After we change the configuration setting, we reboot. Then we ignore and save the configuration. We skip the initial step procedure, and then we type enable to get the configuration prompt. And then after that, enable router configuration but bypass the existing startup configuration. The last phase, or second to the last phase, is to copy Copy the startup configuration from the NVRAM to the running configuration in the RAM. And then view the password by running the show running config command on the system. Then the last phase is enable global configuration mode, set a new password, issue shutdown to every operations interface on the router, set the location of the configuration register, exit configuration mode, and commit the changes. Now, do the changes, reset the password, that's what it means. So these are the steps, what you need to do if the password of the router has been compromised. Now, no password recovery command. The no service password recovery command can be used to disable the hard break sequence. Now, the command is the Cisco IS command. Now, caution, the problem is that where we should be careful. We should be careful such in a way that all the access to the MUMO is a software that enables the recovery. All the access to the MUMO will be disabled. To repair that's what they do, okay? Now, to repair the router, you must obtain a new Cisco system. Is that okay? You must obtain a new Cisco iOS image on a flash SIM, and then on a PCM CIA card, and then you return the router to the Cisco. Do not use this command in our lab, okay? In any of our lab, or in any of your lab in your university, okay? Now let's still on the security management and reporting features. How do we secure and report some suspicious features that we notice in the network? The first part is management reporting consideration. Well, configuring logging for few devices is very simple, straightforward operation, but the problem is to configure logging for hundreds of devices in a big network. That in itself will be quite challenging if the network is very big. Now, implementing login messages for security. Routers should be configured to send log messages to one or more of these. Now, the cursor, the terminal lines, the memory buffers, the SMP, that's Simple Network Management Protocol server, and the syslog servers. So routers should be configured to be able to send messages to all the following aspects that we have mentioned: the cursor, the terminal lines, the memory buffer, the protocol, the Simple Network Management Protocol server, and the syslog server. Now let's look at login destination. First of all, we should be aware that the login destination used affects the system overload. What type of login destination that is used, it affects the system overload. Most overhead are on logging to the cursor. The least overhead are logging to the internal buffer. Okay, these are the least overhead. In between them, you have logging to the VTY, the virtual teleport. And then we have logging to syslog server. These are just, but the most one is the cursor, usually. The most one that people log into. And the least one is the buffer, okay? The memory. Now, two components of syslog system. The two components of the syslog system are the syslog server and the syslog client. We already know what server is. A host that accepts and processes log messages for one or more syslog clients is called the syslog server. A host, any host that accepts and processes the log messages from one or more syslog client is called the syslog server. Then for the syslog client, it is a host that generates log messages and forward them to syslog server for them to do for it. Now the routers, the switches, the PIX, the ASA, the APs, and servers, they all belong to syslog clients. Okay, now let's move on. Cisco log severity levels. Okay, this one I think we can just overlook. Now let's take a look at syslog implementation example. We have syslog client here. We have syslog server here. So this is acting as the server. Okay, all these are the clients. This is the protected LAN. This is the protected LAN. This is the FTP web, file transfer protocol / web server. This is a web server. This is a protected LAN because it has a server. Then this is a router, and these are all the syslog hosts, log hosts. These are the hosts, and this is the demilitarized zone, admin, mail, public web, and so on and so forth. Okay, so router 3, this is the configuration. Router 3 hashtag login, you put the IP address. Router 3 config hashtag login trap informational. Router 3 hashtag login source interface loopback 0. Router 3 config login on. So this is in checking for the syslog, okay, the login vitality. Now let's take a look at the VTY, the virtual teleport monitor login. The VTY monitor login. Now the VTY monitoring option is the most practical method for viewing the login events in the real-time system. Now to view system messages over a VTY section, VTY usually from 0 to 4. So you must configure the login monitor. If you don't configure login monitor, you'll not be able to view the VTY monitor. You must configure it in order to use it to view what is going on. Is that okay? Now let's go to configuring NTP. Network transmission, right? Network transmission protocol. Or we're going to see that in a moment. First of all, let's look at, let's understand what is the NTP. NTP is for time synchronization, okay, in a network. The router has time. This protocol, NTP, helps to, okay, network time protocol. This is a network time protocol. It's used to synchronize the clocking, the timing in a router. Okay, this protocol is used to synchronize the timing. Time has been invented in the universe so that everything would not happen at once. Time has been invented so that everything do not happen at once. That's the sole reason why time was invented. Now the NTP flag and how to we show on this web page. You can read more about the NTP, Network Time Protocol. Many features in a computer network depend on time synchronization. The time synchronization is enabled or it happens with the presence of this protocol. Okay, the time, the clocking synchronization in a router is possible because of the configuration of NTP, Network Time Protocol. So once we install or we configure the Network Time Protocol on a router, it's able to synchronize everything on time base when something is accessed, when something is. So the timing is introduced once we install or we configure the NTP. Many features in the computer network depends on time synchronization. For what? One, for the accurate time information in a syslog message. 2, for certificate-based authentication in the VPNs. 3, for ACNs with the time range configuration. Okay. Now let's talk about the system clock. This system clock, every router has a system clock, and it's put in synchronism with the installation of NTP, Network Time Protocol. The heart of the router time service is the software-based system clock. it's a software-based, okay, system clock that is in a router. This clock keeps track of time from the moment the system starts to operate. Now, the system clock can be set from different number of sources and can be used to distribute the correct time through various mechanisms to other systems, right? Now, when a router with a system calendar is initiated or initialized or rebooted or restarted, then the system clock is set based on the time in the internal battery powered system of the calendar. Now, the system clock can be set either manually. You set the clock in the privilege execute command line, you type it, or automatically use it there, what we call the network time protocol. So, but most of the time we use the automatic method using the network time protocol. So, what is a network time protocol? A network time protocol is an Internet protocol used to synchronize the clocks of network. A network time protocol is an Internet protocol that is used to synchronize the clocks of network connected devices to some time reference. NTP is an Internet standard protocol currently on version 3, and I think we now have version 4, and specified in the RFC 1305. Okay, so now we have another subsection, disabling or use the Cisco router network services and interface. Remember we mentioned this at the beginning, that any Cisco router functionality that you're not using at the moment, you have to disable them to prevent unauthorized users to attack or to access your system. Now, the first is a medium size and large network typically use a firewall appliance. Okay, the medium size network and even large network, they use what we call the firewall appliance like the PIX and the ASA behind the perimeter router. After the router, they put the firewalls to protect the local area network, which adds security to the features and perform user authentication by protecting the packet from being filtered by unauthorized users. Now, we know that firewalls facilitate the creation of the militarized zone, where the firewalls place hosts that are commonly accessed or that commonly access the network as a trusted partner. Unnecessary ports, like the boot server, if not used, you have to, if you're using, you enable, because this is always used. The Cisco Discovery Protocol is always used, you enable it. The configuration auto-loading, you disable if you're not using. The FT server, disable. That's the FTP, the Trivial File Transfer. File Transfer Protocol server. Disable it. The Trivial, which same also, disable it when you're not using. Network Time Protocol, disable if you're not using. All this is to protect the system from unauthorized user. Then, packet assembler and disabler, you have to enable. TCP and UDP minor service, you have to enable. And the maintenance operation protocol, you have to enable. Okay, then the SIPO network management protocol, SNMP, you have to enable because of what they do. Okay, because of what they do. The HTTP configuration and monitoring, it depends on the device that you are using. So if the device requires it, you enable. If not, you disable. Domain name system, DNS, client service has to be enabled in order for you to continuously access the domain. So, but the ones that you are not using, you have to disable. Okay, you have to disable. So with this, we've come to the end of our today's class. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.